Welcome back to the Bandwich Tapes. I'm Brad Williams, and today I'm sitting down with guitarist, composer, and producer Bob Lanzetti. At the time of this recording, Bob was dealing with something very real. He was dealing with hand issues, and we were talking about the stress that comes with that when your hands are your livelihood. I certainly hope that he's doing better, and that all those issues have been resolved. We then go back to the beginning, growing up around his dad's guitar, falling hard for the Beatles, and the moment he realized music could actually be a life, not just a dream. Bob takes me inside the UNT years where Snarky Puppy was born, and we talk about how the Dallas gospel and R&B scene shaped his ear, his feel, and his flexibility as a musician. He also breaks down how Snarky learns music, mostly by ear, often through Logic files, and how three guitarists can coexist without stepping on each other. We also dig into his Nosferatu silent film score, 20th century classical influences, and why producing has become one of his favorite creative lanes. Here's my conversation with Bob Lanzetti. Bob, it is a pleasure to welcome you to the podcast. How are things today?
Everything is good. Thanks for having me.
I'm such a fan of your playing, have been for a long time, and
Thank you.
wanted to reach out and have a chance to just sit down and hear your story and just your perspective on music. So thanks for taking some time to meet with me.
Yeah, of course.
How's your 2026 so far? Are you playing a lot right now?
Yeah, things are good. Actually, at the moment, I'm actually dealing with some hand problems.
Oh, really?
So I haven't played for like over a week. I'm just trying to deal with this. Luckily, I have like a month in between stuff that I really have to do. So I'm hoping that that's enough time to work it out. But yeah, it's stressful. And I had tendonitis like 20 years ago. And I had a structural therapist in New York that really helped work it out. And it's been fine. Every once in a while, I'll have an issue and it goes away in like a day or two. But this is the worst it's been since then. So I'm hoping that it's still rectified soon. But besides that, things have been good so far. And I was in Nashville for a couple weeks playing a bunch of gigs and did a tour with Snarky in Europe just like 2 weeks ago or so. So yeah, we got a lot of other stuff coming up this year too.
That's great. Man, I hate to hear that about your dealing the hand stuff. I'm a bass player and dealt with some right hand issues between my index and middle finger, and I can tell you it's terrifying, especially when you have dates on the calendar and you have to go and fulfill those obligations, and sometimes it's a struggle to get through them, isn't it?
Yeah, it's scary, like because it's just what I do, and it's also scary financially. There's a whole, when it happened 20 years ago, I was not doing anything. I was in college, or I just graduated college, and I had no bills. I was able to just move back in with my parents. So it was still scary, but it was not. It was different though. Now it's like there's more responsibilities. There's more bills. you know.
Yeah.
So it's there's a lot more on the line, I guess, now than there was then.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that is the it's incredible, and I just think about, musicians that deal with hand issues or vocalists who struggle with things with their throat. I mean, when your body is your instrument or an extension of it, and it's your livelihood, it can really lead to a lot of very unwanted stress. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, let's talk about some less stressful things for a little bit. How about that?
Sure. Yeah, sounds good.
So where did all of this start for you? What gave you the inspiration early on that music and specifically guitar was something you wanted to do?
Yeah, well, my dad plays guitar, so that was definitely the initial spark, where the initial spark came from. He was like sort of amateur, but sort of like semi-pro. When I was younger, he was like playing gigs and stuff here and there. So there was always musicians over the house, and so there was a lot of music and a lot of people playing music around me all the time. So that was awesome to grow up around. And I got guitar lessons when I was about 7, and but I didn't like totally take to it. I did it for maybe like a year. And I could just I was like just basically reading through like a Mel Bay book,
Yeah.
At that age. So then I kind of put it down. But then when I was about, I don't know, probably about 10 or 11, I got super into the Beatles. My dad had all that stuff laying around. So I just got super into that. And I was like, oh my, I had recognized a lot of the songs just from him playing them, but I never realized that they were all from the same band. So then when I was starting to go through the records, I was like, oh my God, all of these songs are awesome. There's not just like 2 of their songs and then the other songs are from another band. They're all from the same band. So that was like definitely my first kind of obsession. And then my dad had like a Beatles like chord book laying around, and there was guitars laying around. So I just kind of started picking it up. And then I just got kind of into it and was playing a lot. And then he knew that I was playing and then taught me a song and said, if you practice this song, you can play it with my band. So I was like, oh my God, play with a band? That like blew my mind. I never thought that could be possible. So then I think I practiced that day for like probably 4 hours, just trying to like get this song together. And so then I think at that point, I think there was never any chance that I was ever going to stop. I was totally hooked from that point on. So that was kind of, the beginning for me.
Yeah. So as you were a teenager, you studying with some teachers, some good mentors that kind of set you on the path that you wanted to go?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, like I said, I was playing around 12 and just kind of teaching myself, and my dad would show me things here and there. And then I started playing with friends in school as well as his band. And then when I was about 16, I started getting like formal lessons from a guy named Chris Bono. He was a bit older than me, and was playing. That's funny that he actually just texted me. That's crazy.
Oh, that's really really funny.
That's
wow.
Really funny. Yeah. So I started studying with him. We grew up in the same town, but he was a bit older than me, and he was like the first guy that I had met who was really doing music for real, like on a real level, like playing gigs all the time. And he was a professional musician. So that's kind of what got me into jazz, and also kind of what showed me what being a professional musician meant. Because, to me before then, it was just kind of like, I felt like basically you had to be like Jimmy Page or you were not a musician,
Right.
And he made me realize that there's tons of people that you may not know that are working in the music field, super obvious, but for me at that age, it wasn't. So then it kind of started to feel like, oh, so maybe this is something I can actually do for real.
Yeah.
And so then after that, I had a couple other great teachers in the kind of like New York area. I studied with Vic Juris. Do you know him?
Yeah.
Amazing jazz player.
Yeah.
So I was studying with him for a while, and I took a few lessons with Dave Fusinski. If
I
you're
know that
familiar with,
name. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was all great. And then I went to North Texas, University of North Texas, in like 2000, I guess. And so that was like, just a continuation of studying. I studied jazz performance there.
Yeah. When you arrived at North Texas, was it an overwhelming experience when you got there, or was it like, I'm where I'm supposed to be, or was it both?
It was more, I think, the latter, actually. I think I was by the time I was like a senior in high school, I was so done. I was just like very one focus on music, and I just wanted to get out of there and go somewhere else. It was just great to meet so many like-minded people that were my own age, because most of the people that I knew that were into music were older than me where I grew up. So it was great to meet younger people that were like as interested as me that were my age,
Yeah.
So it was awesome. I mean, the teachers were great, and I met so many great students, and we started Snarky Puppy there. So it was. I mean, it was overwhelming at times, but I was so far away from home for the first time ever.
Yeah.
But mostly it was just really inspiring.
Yeah. My son majored in percussion, and he was accepted to North Texas and was really close to going, and was talking with Mark Ford. And for him, he wanted to be in a smaller studio, so he wound up going to LSU and studying there, and studied with Stanton Moore. And I mean, it was a great experience for him.
Yeah.
But I've just heard so many wonderful things over the years just about the UNT experience for musicians, and just the collaborative spirit there. And, just like you, I mean, you met people there that have become like lifelong collaborators that you're continuing to work with, which is incredible.
Yeah. It was a great experience all around. I mean, some people like smaller schools, and I understand that, but and I was kind of like skeptical of the fact that the program was so big. But in hindsight, I think it was kind of great because there was so many good players who kind of were into different kinds of things,
Yeah.
There was like a lot of good drummers instead of just like two,
Right.
And some of them were into traditional stuff. Some of them were into funk. Some of them were into rock, so it was like, it kind of helps you. It kind of helped me understand the importance of choosing the right person for a gig from a young age, rather than just saying, well, there's only two people that are even good enough to do this. So
Yeah.
I'm just going to get one of them. It's like in that situation, I could kind of like choose from several depending on the kind of music it was,
Yeah.
And also the scene outside of the school, Dallas was like 35, 40 minutes away or something. And it was so steeped in like gospel and hip hop and R&B. So that mixed with the jazz school was a great combination of things. And actually that was kind of the genesis of Snarky was kind of those two different worlds being linked together,
What do you think?
So it was great to be there.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, it's funny. Funny enough, I talked to Mark Lettieri last week.
Oh, cool.
So I'm getting a double dose of Snarky guitar players, which is pretty amazing. But I think he kind of navigated and like lived in that scene too, doing gospel and R&B stuff in that area. And I was wondering about that with you. Like, what do you think you took from that experience? What do you think you learned musically from playing in that world as opposed to playing, a lot of jazz at UNT?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, I think a lot of it, I guess I would say a lot of it was sort of just by exposure and through osmosis in a way. And just seeing how a lot of musicians who came up in like a gospel scene as opposed to a jazz scene learned. I kind of felt like they probably were learning music a lot like jazz musicians used to learn, which was that it was very oral,
Right.
and not so written, and not you're not really learning in school so much. You're learning like in the scene, by just playing with other people and things like that. And I got the sense that a lot of the gospel musicians were also learning playing in church, and then also playing with each other outside of church as well. If I didn't do a ton of like church gigs and stuff, but I subbed for some people here and there. And everyone was just learning stuff by ear. Some of it was very complex music too. And it was challenging, and it kind of helped me learn the importance of that. And actually through doing it, it forced me to get better at it also. Because I think before then, I mean, a lot of stuff I was learning by reading it, and just studying it more so than just going out and playing, So I think a lot of what I learned, I think was from there. And just that so much of it is kind of a feel, and rather than just analytical understanding,
Yeah.
So yeah, I think being around those musicians was invaluable, really.
I think so much of it too is knowing how to be flexible on the fly, and maybe arrangements may change at a moment's notice, or it could have changed during a rehearsal, and you have to, put that to memory and make sure you can call it back up when it happens during the hit. I mean, there's a lot of those things. I think that learning maybe on the bandstand is maybe more valuable than learning in the rehearsal space.
Yeah,
learning that,
absolutely,
doing it under pressure.
Yeah, for sure. It's it's funny you say that, because I mean sometimes you would do a rehearsal, and then when the gig started, you would do none of the stuff that you just rehearsed. Because there's an audience there, and that depending on the energy of the audience, that may change the repertoire. And then you're just kind of like, well, now we're playing this that we didn't even rehearse at all. So yeah,
is snarky stuff funny. Is the snarky stuff mostly notated when you guys are learning the tunes, or is a lot of that stuff just kind of arranged?
Yeah, no, none of it
rehearsals.
None of it's notated. In the early days, Mike, who was writing almost all the music at the time, Mike League, it was notated then, but the last like probably 15 years or more, nothing has been written down. So it's all done orally. And nowadays we just kind of usually send each other Logic files. So that's helpful, because then you could at least mute certain instruments, or, so you can make sure you can hear your part more easily. But yeah, that's how we do everything. So if we're doing a record, we'll just get tons of Logic files from all the different band members, and we just kind of have to sit down and shed all the parts. Yeah. And a lot of times you don't know what you're going to play. It might be, so you kind of need to learn. Ideally, you need to learn chords, riffs, melodies, because then when we rehearse, we'll kind of trade parts around to see where it sits better.
Yeah.
So I mean, I can't say that I know every melody for sure, but ideally that's the goal. Sometimes you'll hear a part and you'll say, this has got to be a guitar thing. It sounds like it's going to be a guitar part. So I'll put extra emphasis on that. But, then there's a lot of things that it could be a keyboard, could be horns, could be guitar,
How do you know when to assert your voice and when to maybe kind of step back and let someone else step up and do that?
Mm-hmm. I think at this point, it's kind of something that we can just sort of intuitively know. Because we all know each other's playing so well,
Yeah.
Sometimes we'll hear a certain kind of part, like certain kind of guitar part, and it just sounds like, oh, this has Mark written all over it, you know. So it's like he should do this thing, you know, and maybe I'll do this, and Chris can do this, you know, and we can kind of generally work out things that way. Besides that, I think we just are trying to create a balance, you know. When we make records, all three of us are there, but when we play live, it's usually just one of us at a time. And we basically just kind of take turns, more or less, like doing gigs.
Yeah.
They're split pretty evenly. So yeah, but when we make records, it's like, you know, if Mark is doing like a funky thing down low, I might do something more like legato higher up, you know. Or it could, you know, you can think of it like James Brown kind of guitar parts too, you know, something like that, where it's like these question and answers, you know, these parts playing off each other. So we kind of try and do stuff like that. Or sometimes we'll play the same thing in harmony, you know. And sometimes we'll just lay out. Sometimes it'll feel like maybe I should just not play anything for this section, you know.
Yeah. Rather than, you know, fighting over the same sonic space. I would imagine that playing in different registers, or maybe just stepping back and instead of stepping on each other, which, you know, I think that's one of the things that you do so well is it never feels like there's too much going on. And it's, you know, it never feels like there's any sort of a struggle over this part of the range. You know, everyone's complementing each other really well.
Yeah, well, you know, we'll also do things like doubling keyboard parts too, you know, just to kind of provide another texture and more weight to a certain chord pattern or something. So yeah, there's usually ways that we can find to make sure we're not just doing too many things. A lot of things are doubled.
What do you think younger or inexperienced players need to understand about, or what would you like for them to understand more about playing in a band setting? Because I think, you know, it's easy for people to get better at their instrument in a practice room or playing along with a track or a click or whatever, but it's a whole other animal, right? Playing with other live musicians. And what are some of the things that younger players could understand about what that experience is like and the give and take of the ensemble?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, you know, I would say first and foremost, just like I was saying about James Brown, like a lot of times if sometimes people will play like a funky guitar part and they're playing way too much, you know, and even when they're not playing a chord, they'll be like muting the strings and you hear like kind of stuff. And it's like,
right.
You know, just be aware that like the drums may be kind of playing some of those chickas, you know, and you don't need to do it. You can just lay out, you know, or put a rest there, you know, just being very aware of what else is happening in the groove and find your part that helps heighten that instead of covering it up. And if you are going to play something like with another musician in the band, make sure that you're really locked, so it doesn't sound flammy.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it comes down to listening, but also just knowing how to react to what else is happening. It's not only listening; it's knowing what to do with what you're hearing, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say about like in a groove like that. I guess I would say in general, just making sure that whatever is the most important part of a particular song is being heard. Like if there's like a melody being played, if there's like a band and there's like five band members and there's one person playing a melody and everyone else is playing loud and on top of it that you can't hear the melody, then that's going to be a problem. So you need to play quieter. You need to be aware that the melody needs to be heard. Maybe you should even double the melody. So just, and if same thing is if there's a solo, don't play so loud that you're covering up the soloist, So a lot of it comes down to like listening and awareness and knowing the song well enough to know what should be sticking out the most, like self-balancing throughout a song, I think is really important,
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And it's a good life skill. I think it's transferable to every other part of your life,
Yeah.
Know when to get out of the way, right? And no, I agree 100% with all of that, of just knowing when to stay out of the way and let someone else have that moment, it's crucial. I'm a fan of course, I'm a fan of everything you do with Snarky Puppy, but I also really dig all this other stuff that you do in this other part of your career, your solo stuff. I'd love to talk a little bit about that, but I also I had not listened to the Nosferatu album until I was getting ready for this. I'm so intrigued by that. I'd love to ask you how that all happened and what that experience you took away from that of doing that.
Yeah, that was really a great experience, and I learned
really
so
cool,
much.
Man.
Thank you. I learned so much. Did you happen to just hear the audio, or did you watch the film with it?
I just listened to the audio, but it's on my list
I think
to watch it.
To me, it like works so much better with the film if you could see it with the film. So I would recommend doing that. But so that project came about. Do you know the movie theater Alamo Drafthouse?
Yeah.
So Mike League's cousin, that's his theater. He started that theater.
Really?
Tim League, yeah. So that was the connection. So they had a series where they were having different artists write music to different silent films. And they asked Mike, so several ground up artists ended up getting chosen to write music for different films. Chris Bullock did one. I did one. PRD Mice, which I think is a Brazilian group, did one. House of Waters, I think, did one. There was like Siren Tip did one. There was like maybe 5 or 6 or 7 of them or something. So anyway, I chose Nosferatu, and it was during COVID, so we all had so much time on our hands. So that was actually like a blessing in a way, because I had unlimited time to try all these things that I wouldn't have had time to do if I had been playing gigs and stuff. So, so when I was asked to do it, I kind of really wanted it to be almost like 20th century classical music. I've always been a big fan of a lot of that stuff, like Schoenberg and Ligeti and Stockhausen and stuff. So, I was kind of intrigued about trying to get into some of those like kind of avant-garde elements. And so I kind of was able to end up writing for a string quartet, which I had never done before. So, and I had the time, like I said, I had the time to just like trial and error things until I kind of was able to figure out how to do it. I listened to some Debussy string quartets or his one string quartet and some other things, and then just kind of like jumped in, and I think I tried a couple of times and failed, and then had to readjust my approach, but kind of figured out how to make it work for me. So it was great. And so I had a band on some of the tunes. Some of the tunes were just multi-track guitars. Some of them are just vocals. Some of it is strings. So it was, but I think the underlying thing was trying to get at a lot of these like avant-garde classical textures that I had been interested in for a long time. So that was how the project started and what my approach was. Yeah, super interesting, and I learned so much doing that. And I did a lot of the editing myself, so I learned a ton about how to use Logic better and things like that.
It's funny you say that. When I started listening to it, I was 5 or 6 tracks into it, and Liggity was literally the word that came to me.
Oh, really?
Through all of it, it was like, I was like, it's like looking through that lens. I love it. Yeah, and
oh, cool. Thank you.
I love the approach of using different ensembles, or like you said, multi-track guitars, and it's just I really enjoyed it. It was like a kind of a nice departure, but also this same kind of thing that's you do so well. I really enjoyed it. Is it something that you would like to explore more in the future?
Yeah, possibly. When I did it, I was like super interested in trying to do more film score work. But I think, kind of the reality of what it is kind of started to set in a little bit, which is that it's hard to make any kind of decent money compared to like the amount of time you have to put in,
Yeah.
And also on that project, because the film was already completed and I wasn't having to work with a director or something, I had complete creative control. It's like if you write a bunch of stuff and then the director ends up cutting the scene in half, then you got to like alter it to make the music fit. And it just started to feel like maybe it wasn't going to be as enjoyable in other situations,
Yeah.
So I would still be open to doing it again, but it became something that I wasn't necessarily wanting to pursue, like as a real career path,
Yeah. Yeah. I think about these guitarists, someone like a Johnny Greenwood or a Bryce Dessner or someone. Yeah. Johnny Greenwood he's incredible
so
at it. But, same kind of thing. I mean, he's so informed by contemporary classical music, same kind of thing, Messiaen and so many of those 20th century composers. But I really enjoyed what you did with that. I was like,
awesome.
Okay, this is really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, some of the multi-track guitar stuff too was kind of like I don't know, like kind of like Fripp and Eno kind of stuff that was influenced. I was influenced by that a lot. So that kind of found its way into some of that kind of stuff, here and there.
who are some of your guitar heroes? Who are some of the players that you really connected to and you were learning to play, or even to this day?
Yeah, I mean, when I was young, it was kind of like the really classic stuff, like Jimmy Page, Jimi Hendrix, David Gilmour. I was super into Pink Floyd for a while. And then when I started getting into like more interested in virtuosic guitar players, I kind of got into Steve Ray Vaughan and Eddie Van Halen, Steve Vai, guys like that. And then I think I guess the people that I was super into in the jazz world at first were like more of the fusion guys. Like I was really into John McLaughlin, Bill Frisell, Metheny, Schofield, Mike Stern, all the classic jazz guys.
Yeah.
Wayne Krantz. And then, as I got older, I got really into some of the really old stuff. Charlie Christian, Django, Wes Montgomery, Jim Hall, all that kind of stuff too. So that was a big influence on me. And I was also really into things like Albert King and Freddie King, B.B. King, Buddy Guy. And then I got, at a certain point, I started getting into really kind of like abstract textural stuff. I got really into Sonic Youth, Thurston Moore and Lee Ronaldo, Robert Fripp. I had another name in mind. I'm really into David Torn. I really love him.
Yeah.
There's someone else I'm not.
Who's the guy I was thinking of? Like Derek Bailey? Did you get into
Derek
that?
Bailey.
Like,
I was super into him for a while. Yeah. So, just kind of all over the map, but a lot of it, I guess jazz, free improvising, and blues was all of those are a big factor,
Well, I love that it's such a wide palette, and that, it's not, I think a lot of players can tend to stay in one lane and really just draw from kind of one place. But I would imagine that wide spectrum of players really made you who you are, pulling from all of those different inspirations.
Yeah, I think so. It's like I think for any musician, it's like you get like all these different influences and then they come out through your own personal filter,
Yeah.
And that ends up being like your sound,
Yeah. Well, and also don't just listen to the greats on your particular instrument, right? Listen to sax players, listen to piano players, and hear how they phrase or voice things differently.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely important.
Yeah. Do you do a lot of teaching? Do you have any private students?
I have a few. I don't do it much. I used to do it a lot when I first moved to New York. But then there was a long stretch of time where I really didn't do it at all. But now I'm doing it a little bit more again. But I really only have a few students. And once in a while, I'll do like a group class or something. And then on tours, a lot of times, like myself or whichever group I'm with will do like master classes and things like that.
Yeah.
That's really helpful for making a tour feasible financially, especially with like a new band. If it's a new band,
how long have you been living? Do you live in Brooklyn? Is that what part of?
Actually, now I live in South Carolina. Actually.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah, but I was in New York.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I was in New York for like 13 years, and then kind of during the pandemic, I moved down here. So yeah, it's very different.
What part of South Carolina are you in?
Charleston.
Okay. Yeah. I grew up in Atlanta, so it's and I have one of my best friends lives in Savannah, and I just love that part of the U.S. It's so nice.
It's nice. Yeah, it's a very different vibe, but it is nice. Yeah, like Asheville's like 4 hours away. Savannah's like 2 hours away, I think. So Atlanta's probably like 5.
Yeah. How has that transition been? Was it a like big shock after living in New York for so long?
Yeah, it was. But I think I was kind of ready for a change, and because it was during the pandemic, like there wasn't anything happening anyway. So, um, it seemed like I think it kind of set in more later when things opened up, and then
Yeah.
I started seeing like people playing gigs and stuff that I wasn't on.
Yeah.
But I go to New York a lot. I'm there like probably every couple months for like a week at a time. I'll be there. I try to make sure that I'm available to go because I want to stay involved in the scene. So basically, if someone asks me to do something, I'll usually say yes, and then I'll try to book other things around it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I love Charleston, man. It's
mhm.
my wife worked for a company that's based in Charleston, and
Oh, okay.
it's a beautiful part of the U.S., man.
Yeah,
And
it's really
I hear
nice.
of so many people moving there. I think
Yeah,
I
a lot of
think
people
Danny
there.
McBride lives in Charleston now. Now I
Oh,
don't
really?
know.
Okay.
Yeah, so maybe you can run into him somewhere. That'd be great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's a
Um,
lot of people moving here, and the weather this time of year, the weather is great. I mean, it's kind of brutal in the summer, but the winters are so mild.
yeah,
It's
that's.
nice.
I live in St. Louis, and yeah, it's
Mm,
after living in Georgia most of my life. I'm like, oh wow, I thought it got cold in the winters in Georgia. I
yeah,
had no idea what I was talking about.
yeah. The Midwest is rough in the winter.
It really is, man. I had no idea it was going to be this. I mean, we had like 14 inches of snow a couple of weeks ago, and I'm like,
Yeah,
this is crazy. Yeah, it's
but it's
nuts.
rough in the summer in the Midwest too, right?
Yeah, it is.
It's like this; those
Yeah.
plains just like are just punished both seasons.
Yeah, I feel like we get the extremes
Yeah,
of the winters. I mean, it's not like Minneapolis cold, but it still gets really stinking cold here sometimes. It's
yeah.
nuts.
Hmm.
Yeah. I wanted to ask a little bit about you as writing and arranging,
Hmm.
both with Snarky, but also, for your ensembles. And do you tend to compose with personnel in mind? Do you like to write to the player, or do you like to just write the idea and allow them to kind of do their thing with it?
Um, that I think can change depending on what I'm writing for. Sometimes I'll just write something, like I'll just kind of stumble upon an idea that sparks my interest, and I'll just kind of develop it and write something. And then it could kind of be anything. But then usually at a certain point, I'll start to realize that this would be cool for this particular band, you know. And sometimes I sit down to write for a specific band. But I guess in either case, once it does start to be written for a band, then I will think about personnel. Um,
Yeah.
and that really does change the way I approach it. I even kind of might kind of just imagine, even visually see them in my head playing, and that and then I'll hear their sound, and I'll actually even see them in my mind, and then that kind of informs how things might shift too. Maybe not so much with like note choice, but things like inflections and stuff. Like I might put, like, if I'm writing for like violin or something, I might like start hearing like glissando or stuff, Um, so yeah, it ends up being part of it for sure, part of the process for
Yeah.
sure.
Has being in Snarky Puppy, do you think it has influenced how you compose outside of it? Do you think you're a different composer having been in that group for so long?
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think, everybody at this point, but I think originally Mike League was so specific about parts, and there's so much that's arranged. People may not even realize how much of it is kind of written. Um, like very few things are kind of just left up to improvising or the moment. I mean, of course, there's solos and stuff, but a lot of times, like most of the time, parts are written specifically for a section or something. Like counter melodies and things like that are almost never improvised or almost never came by the player. It was usually written that way, you know.
Yeah.
So I think just that like attention to detail became something that I was very keen on as well when I started writing for other groups, you know, and thinking about things in terms of production too. Um, you know, I might be writing for a group, and then you know, I'm just hearing in my head that this is going to have a lot of overdubs of this instrument or that instrument, or there's other parts that we won't play live that will be on the record, you know. So a lot of like arranging and production ideas. I think all that stuff has been influenced a lot by Snarky for me.
I think so much as musicians, we think about identity, whether that's tone, touch, you know, playing ability, what ensembles we're in. And I would imagine that, you know, a lot of your identity as a musician is through your association with Snarky Puppy, but there is so much of your identity that's also not as a member of that band. Do you ever have to, do you, is it a conscious thing to try to have two identities as thing, or is it like a thing I do and then I put that to the side and then I work on my solo thing? How do you navigate that landscape?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I wouldn't say it's so conscious, but you know, it's kind of like, I think it's just a byproduct of liking a lot of different kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like all the stuff I was saying before, you know, like kind of avant-garde experimental stuff is part of it. But then I'm also like, for some reason, really into like old country, you know?
I'm
Um,
with you on that one, man. Yeah, I
yeah.
get it.
So, um, you know, I was, you know, Loretta Lynn and Patsy Cline and a lot of those old types of recordings too, like just the way that the background vocals sound on Patsy Cline records or something like
Yes.
that, you know. So that all became a part of it too. And there was, you know, there's some kind of experimental sounding stuff in Snarky, but not a ton. And there's almost no like Americana type stuff in Snarky.
Yeah.
So I think when I started writing a lot of my own music, all that stuff was just kind of in there. So yeah, so it wasn't such a conscious decision to do something very different, but it was just a part of my makeup, you know. And so it kind of just came out that way. So yeah, yeah, I think like probably 10 or 15 years ago, Snarky was very busy. And so I think I did have like a desire to do something really different because I was playing with Snarky so much. And I wanted to do something that was totally different than that. So I wanted to do something that was almost like simpler music that was like kind of tuneful rather than funky or groove based or odd meters and stuff. I was kind of wanting to do something that was just like songs, you know, that you could imagine someone singing, you know.
Yeah.
So I wrote a bunch of tunes that a lot of them ended up being on my solo record. But yeah, I think that just kind of that was just part of who I was. And I think a lot of that comes from being a big fan of Bill Frisell as well as some of the country singers and stuff. a big fan of Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, all that kind of stuff found its way in there a bit. And also the instruments, like I had pedal steel in my band,
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I was going to mention that I heard pedal steel on there, and just it sounds wonderful. Who's playing that on the solo album?
That's Philip Sturck, who was he was based in New York for a long time, but he's in Nashville now, like so many other pedal steel players.
Yeah.
But lately I've been playing, when I do play gigs with that group, it's Rob Ritchie has been playing pedal steel a lot, who's a great guitar player. I knew him as a guitar player in New York, but the last few years he's been playing steel also. He sounds great on it as well. So yeah, but yeah, my intention for that record, I remember, was, I wanted to write things that were, a lot of it sounded like things that you might have heard before, but then there was always some kind of a twist that took it out of the original sound. Like maybe it was just the harmony or something like that. And also with the roles of the instruments, like I wanted to treat myself as like a lead singer a lot of the times, but then I would step out of that role and be playing solos, and the steel would be playing a lot of like kind of more common country type comping, and then at another point in the song maybe playing more like really textural stuff with effects and things. So that was kind of a general vibe that I had in mind for that.
Yeah, the solo album it's wonderful, and yeah, it's I love the writing, and just the playing on it. Your playing is just so wonderful on there, as everyone sounds great on it. But yeah, and there's, you talk about that old country stuff. I mean, there's difficulty in the simplicity of that stuff too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's it's so wonderful to hear those people that can just play with such restraint, and it's just all of the air and the space in those parts, and it's I think that's what they're not playing is as beautiful as what they are playing,
Yeah, and so I'm so interested in the producers of that stuff too. A lot of it was Owen Bradley. A lot of those
Owen
old
Bradley,
records.
yeah.
That and the arrangements too. It's like little things, like there might be steel and background vocals and maybe strings or something, but they're rarely playing at the same time. It's like, for this verse you might have background vocals, and then that stops, and then like the steel comes in, but you don't really notice it if you're just casually listening. But when you really start diving into what it is, it's like, oh, it's like they're playing similar roles and they're trading off when they're doing it,
Yeah, it's an interesting. I don't know if you've ever listened to there's a podcast called Cocaine and Rhinestones. I don't know if you ever listened to that podcast.
I've heard a couple episodes, yeah.
Yeah, he did an entire season about George Jones, and he really digs into the Owen Bradley, Chet Atkins, Billy Sherrill. He really talks a lot about those producers and the different sounds that they were all getting around that time, and it's really interesting to hear just how different the producers were informing the type of music coming out of Nashville in that part of the in the early 60s.
Yeah, such a major factor in why those records sound like that.
Well, Bob, I've had a great time hanging out with you. Thanks for spending some time with me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And best of luck, and hopefully we'll see you in person sometime soon.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please follow or subscribe to the Bandwich Tapes wherever you listen, and consider leaving a rating or review. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.